Welcome everybody to this exciting time to be able to get together. It seems like maybe not so much an exciting topic, management and leadership, management versus leadership. What are the differences? But I'm so glad that you're joining me, because I do think this is something that we need to be equipped with the tools to understand management leadership, what their roles are, how different they are, and then how do you become a good manager and a good leader? Because every organization, no matter what it is, has people that need to be led, people that need to be managed, and people who need to do things. And there are many principles in a lot of leadership books and management books that are taken straight from the Bible. And the Bible doesn't get a lot of credit for the quotes that are used from it, and which I kind of find disappointing, to be honest with you. Because I wish that they would more just acknowledge where they're getting things from. But it is one of those things that I think that if you read the Bible, you see that Jesus was a servant leader. He said, the Son of Man has come not to be served, but to serve," and yet he was the leader of mankind, and he showed us that. We have great examples of leadership in the Bible. You've got Gideon, who had no natural talent for being a leader, but needed the power of God, and then became the most amazing leader with a very small army. Then you've got people like the centurion, who taught us how to manage and lead. He knew how to lead his 100 soldiers, but he also knew how to manage them. We know he knew how to manage them because one of them got sick, and he needed his servant healed. Now, we don't really know whether that was one of his soldiers or not, but it was somebody who he was responsible for. And that centurion knew the difference about taking care of people was management. Leadership was just telling them what to do. So we have all these different examples in the Bible. And I can tell you that as we kind of go through this today, that I want this to apply to you no matter where whatever organization you're working in. I had the privilege of going straight into an accounting firm out of high school, and I worked in public accounting. In Australia, it's called chartered accounting, for 14 years. And I started off as a junior, and I can tell you that the progression that I made in my career, even though I was qualified and had education, I started off as a junior accountant. Then I was an intermediate accountant, and I didn't lead anybody. I didn't manage anybody. Then I was a senior. I was an audit senior, which means that I would work together with others, but I didn't lead them and I didn't manage them. Then I became a supervisor. And that was the first time I started to manage people, was being a supervisor. Then I became an audit manager, which was then when my role turned mainly to managing people. Then I became a senior manager, where I managed other managers, all the time following the leadership from the partners of the accounting firm in which I worked. And it was 7 years into my work journey before I led anybody. 7 years. It was 4 years into my journey before I even managed anybody. Yet I find in many organizations today that people go straight into leadership. It's like you are immediately appointed a leader, and without any real equipping of how to be a manager and how to even manage yourself, let alone how to manage other people. If you look at Amazon and you see all the books that are written on management versus all the books that are written on leadership, you'll see there's an overwhelming bias in terms of leadership. Many of you would have read leadership books. I don't know how many on this call or watching this have ever read management books. I don't know how many of you have ever been taught on management, but I would imagine that many of you have been on leadership courses or taught some form of leadership. I want to start off by reading to you from the Bible, greatest leadership and management tool, I believe, and never been improved upon. And so I want to read it to you. Not that this session really is only for Christians. Anybody could watch this and use the principles from the Bible. I want to read to you from the first chapter of Deuteronomy. And it starts off, it says, "These are the words of Moses that he spoke to Israel in the wilderness." And this is what he says: "The Lord your God has multiplied you, and here you are today as the stars of heaven in multitude. May the Lord God of your fathers make you 1,000 times more numerous than you are and bless you as he has promised you. How can I alone bear your problems and your burdens and your complaints? Choose wise, understanding, and knowledgeable men from among your tribes, and I will make them heads over you. And you answered me and said, the thing which you have told us to do is good. So I took the heads of your tribes, wise and knowledgeable men, made them heads over you, leaders of thousands, leaders of hundreds, leaders of 50, leaders of tens, and officers for your tribes. What is taken out of those verses a lot is the concentration on leading. Are you a leader of 10? Are you a leader? What we forget is that there's a huge concentration in that passage on the tribes themselves and the officers. Whenever you have any organization, you will always have way more people in management positions than you will true leadership. And that is something that we need to understand. It doesn't matter what your position is in any organization. You have to have a self-awareness of whether your role is something that is a management position or a leadership position, even if you've been given a title of leader. I think that title, to be honest with you, is given away a little too easily. I don't think it's earned enough, and I think it puts responsibility and pressure on people that aren't ready to receive it. And that can crush a lot of people. And I don't want that to ever happen to people who are direct reports or people in downlines that I oversee. Whatever you do in any organization, whether it be management or leadership, what you have to have is a very high level of self-awareness. And your self-awareness must be always increasing, always. I think about Peter as an example. He was always increasing in self-awareness. How? Because of the mistakes that he made, different things that he did wrong. Increasing in self-awareness. If you look at the great scions of industry, you look at people like Henry Ford. Henry Ford, the more aware he became of himself, the more aware he was of what he was able to achieve. Same with Rockefeller, same with Andrew Carnegie, the great pioneers of American industry. The more aware of themselves they were, the more aware they were of how to lead and manage other people. And we have a great, opportunity to look at simple verses in the Bible that tell us that we need to love your neighbor as you love yourself. So there's a connection between our understanding how to love ourselves and how to love other people. Well, it's the same with management and leadership. You have to have an understanding of how to manage yourself in order to have an understanding of how to manage others. So you could say, manage others as you manage yourself. If you're not managing yourself, then you're probably not doing the best job that you could do of managing others. Now, the terms management and leadership are used interchangeably, I find, but there's a huge difference between the two of them. They both play very important roles in balancing an organization. They're very essential. One of the key distinctions between management and leadership is this. Management is the management of things such as systems and processes. Systems and processes are managed. People are led, and you lead people by managing them. Now, by contrasting the two, it gives us a little bit of an opportunity for a better understanding of the differences, as well as what we need to do to improve our management techniques and our leadership techniques. Management really is all about the art of implementation. A manager executes goals and objectives based upon the vision that has been passed down and taught to them. And what they do is they make sure that policies are followed. They make sure regulations are followed. They make sure that objectives are met. They make sure that people are motivated. A manager must have a high level of being able to motivate people. A manager understands that it's their responsibility to deliver on-time results, ensure the smoothness of the operations they manage, and also to be aware of the budget and financial amounts that they have to manage. Leadership is about strategic vision. Leadership is about where are we going. It shapes the overall culture. Leadership shapes the culture. And effective leaders have the ability to motivate action around a common purpose or goal. And good leaders actually do two things. They provide a really clear vision, with boundaries, so targets and boundaries, which is, this is the target, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do, everything else in the middle, use whatever you need to as resources to hit the target. But they also make sure they set up the boundaries for integrity within their organization. That is a responsibility of leaders. And the more integrity that leaders show, the more integrity that people that they lead and people they manage will show. And that is something that we've seen a lot. Now, what I'm going to do is just show you a table. I'm going to share my screen with you here of the difference between, let's just go here. So let me just go to share my screen. Which I just need to do here. Yeah. Okay, there we go. Now, what this is, and Melissa, can you just give me a thumbs up if that has now come across? Okay. Now, what this is a table on the differences between what managers and leaders do. This is not about how to be a good manager or how to be a good leader. This is about what managers do and what leaders do. Now, I'm sure as we go through this, I have no doubt there'll be some confusion that will automatically come up within you, because you will think, well, hang on a sec, I thought that was my job, but maybe that's somebody else's. So let's just go through them. Leaders innovate. Managers standardize. So managers find a way to get things to work in a way that implements the innovation. Leaders develop, managers maintain. Now, in a lot of organizations, nobody likes the word maintain. Oh, I don't want to maintain. I want to be pressing forward. I want to keep moving forward. Listen, if you don't maintain first, you can't move forward. Maintenance of your area and people that you are managing is what allows your team to move forward. Leaders have possibility thinking about what is possible. Managers predominantly think about problem solving. So they're, okay, how do we solve this? That's where collaboration, managers must be good collaborators. Whenever you have an opportunity to solve a problem, if you think that you're the only one that can come up with a solution to a problem because you're the expert, you will ignore the opportunities to solve a problem in a way that you had not thought of. Leaders have long-term views. Managers think more in the shorter term. Leaders shape culture more than managers, whereas managers enact culture. Now, I know many managers would love to, I want to help shape culture. That's what will happen as you increase in your leadership responsibilities and your leadership abilities. But primarily, a manager is about making sure the culture of the organization is enacted and it's carried out and there's a consistency across the organization. Leaders are proactive, managers are reactive. There's nothing wrong with being reactive. People think, oh, well, you've got to be proactive at everything. Yes, you do when it comes to leading yourself. But when it comes to managing other people, often your responsibility is to react to what comes up with the people that you are managing. Then you've got the what and why. Leaders deal with the what and why. Managers deal with the how and when. Leaders set the more of the why because they understand the connection between the vision and what the what is, if that makes sense. And then you've got managers realizing that they need now to work out how to make it happen and when to happen so that the vision can be achieved. Then you've got leaders do the right things, managers do things right. This is an important distinction. The difference between what leaders do and what managers do. Leaders have that very heavy obligation to do the right things, which must be set by the culture, leadership culture within any organization. And managers have an opportunity and a responsibility to do things right, which means that they know what the right things are. Now they need to do them. Leaders set direction, managers set and plan details. Now, a lot of people don't want to do that. They go, no, I want to be the direction setting. If everybody's setting the direction of a ship, it's not going to go in the same direction. There is only one captain. You can't have everybody heading in different directions. You won't have unity if you do that. Now, so that means an understanding of, okay, well, what's my responsibility in planning those details? Leaders originate, managers initiate. So you've got leaders originating plans, goals, all those kind of things for the organization, and then managers initiating plans and goals with their teams and making sure that they have those details carried out. Vision is the responsibility of leaders. Goals and objectives, managers. How does that work? Leaders set the vision, say this is the target. Managers have to set these little micro goals in order to hit the big bullseye. They have to set objectives. This is how we're going to do that. So you are still moving forward as a manager, just in a different way than the leader does. And then finally, you've got leaders being responsible for values, whereas managers are responsible for rules. Values, that's why whenever you come into an organization, one of the first things you do is you understand the values of the organization. What are the organizational values? What are the leadership values? And then you have an understanding of what it means. And I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here. Sharing, stop share. Okay. Then you have that opportunity to say, okay, what are the rules that I must now implement in order to make sure that those things happen? So that's the difference in large scale terms between what leaders are responsible for, what managers are responsible for. So if we move into what makes a good manager and what makes a good leader, I'm going to talk about 5 essential skills of both. And there's one overlapping skill that both managers and leaders have, and none of you will be surprised to know that it's the word communication. Both managers and leaders must be good communicators. The other skills are different. And traditionally, managers have way more of a role in the day-to-day operations of any organization and their teams. So let's talk about what their 5 skills are that are required. The first one is organization. The first skill of a good manager is organization. Managers must be highly organized. They have to be able to organize, establish, and maintain processes. They have to be able to then monitor the progress. How do they do that? Organizing themselves. They have to be able to organize priorities. I mean, you have to organize. Yeah, people say, well, which one do we do first? Do we do this? Do we do that? Which one are we going after? And you can think about your own area as I go through this and whatever you're responsible for. Managers have to have the skill of keeping their teams on track in order to achieve milestones. The only way you can do that is to stay organized. They have to keep things in order. Managers must keep things in order, all part of organization. The second thing that managers have to have is they must have an attention to detail. They must be acutely aware of what's happening on their teams. I would say this is probably the number one problem with people who assume leadership positions and don't want to manage other people. They lack any desire to be acutely aware of what's going on. Now, this is not about micromanaging. We're going to get onto that in a couple of seconds. Being acutely aware means that you know exactly what's going on with the areas and the people you manage. You know, you're not just standing there saying, well, I gave them the job, I delegated it, I hope things are going well. No, a manager is always acutely aware. Now, most people on this call manage people more than you lead people. You might think, well, I'm a leader, and you may have some leadership responsibilities. But a lot of your actual time, 90% of your time, would be in managing situations and people. And you have to have an acute awareness. And I know many of you, who I work with, and I'll ask a question about something in your area, and some of you are amazing at having acute awareness. You'll be able to quote figures, numbers. You know exactly what's going on in your area, and that's because you are displaying good management skills. But I can say that I think a lot of organizations fail in this because we don't hold people accountable for acute awareness of managers. We just delegate and then hope for the best. That a good manager doesn't do that. When you are acutely aware, that's when you can spot whether there are maybe something's going to go over budget, maybe something's not going to be done within the right time frame. Maybe somebody's heading off on the wrong direction, and you can stop them before they go too far off it. Again, this is not micromanaging. This is being aware. There is a difference between being aware of what people you are managing are doing and actually telling them what to do. The third thing that managers must have a skill in is communication. Now, both leaders and managers must have great communication skills, but they are different for managers and leaders. And I will say that if my observation, if you can't master the skills required to be a good manager, you will find it very difficult to master the communication skills required to be a good leader. The communication skills that are required for management are these. You have to be able to provide necessary feedback to your teams. Necessary feedback. You have to be able to clear up confusion. You have to be able to offer direction. You don't tell people, when you're managing people, the worst thing you can do is tell people how to do every single step of their job. You will never allow any innovation. You will never allow any free thinking. You never allow anybody to come up with an idea that might be different than your own. But you can offer direction. Hey, this is a suggestion of something that you could do. A manager has great collaborative communication skills. They know how to collaborate with other managers. They know how to say, hey, listen, you manage this area in our organization. I manage this area. How are you doing that? Are there any things that we could cross-pollinate? And then a manager must have the ability to communicate to resolve conflicts. Any team or group of people that you are managing is at some stage or another going to have some conflict, and it's going to need to be managed. And the better a communicator, a manager is, the easier time you're going to have steering the direction of your team that you manage. The fourth thing that managers need to have is the skill of time management. Managers are responsible for the daily forward motion of their departments. And the only way you can pull that off is if you can develop the skills of managing your time well. Now, everybody has a different way of doing that and carrying it out. And it might be calendars, it might be the use of assistants, it might be the use of volunteers, it might be the use of a paper diary. It might be anything, which is what we call it's a bit of an Australian word there for you. But here's the thing. You have to find out a way to manage your time. Now, again, let's go back to the beginning. If you don't manage your time of yourself well, you will not be able to manage the time of other people that you manage or lead. So if you are not a good time manager and you manage, or if you lead people, then you need to really get up to speed very quickly on how to manage your time and be a time manager. You have to find a way that works for you. Now, one of the ways that I use is I use an assistant. Back to my CEO days of allowing an assistant to manage my time. Melissa, who's on this call and moderating this call today, is my assistant. She sets everything that I do. Everything, if anybody ever says to me, do you have time for a call? Do you have time for this? I'm like, whatever Melissa says. And I literally wake up every day and I look at my calendar on my phone and I do whatever Melissa has on my calendar. And that's how I get things done. That's how I manage my time. I know that she has a responsibility in her position to do that for me. Now, I understand not everybody has an assistant, and I know that some people who could have an assistant don't want one, and that's fine. If you don't have one, you have to find a way. Now, I didn't always have a Melissa. I didn't have an assistant until I was a CEO in the corporate world. Up until then, I had to manage my own time. How did I do that? I would have a daily diary, is again that word that we use in Australia, which is you would call maybe a calendar, written calendar, and I would write down at the beginning of every day all the things that I needed to get done, and I would categorize them into things that must be done and things that I would like to get done. Simple as that. And I would make sure that I didn't finish my workday until all the things that must be done got done. Simple as that. Very, very simple method. Time management is something that you have to be good at as a manager. You have to be able to get things done and prioritize things for yourself as well as for your team. And there's a great quote, and we actually don't know who it's attributed to because many industry leaders have used this quote, so we don't know where it comes from. And it's this: organizations are built on the backs of great and wonderful managers, because managers get things done ahead of time and under budget, and they do it time and time again. Please don't ever despise management. I feel like the word management and the title of management and the role of management has been given a bad rap. And yet there are so many positives that come out of being a good manager that really do help the overall effectiveness of any organization. Great managers can absorb a huge amount of work. They can navigate changes in schedules. They can navigate changes in their work environment, and they can still hit their goals. Now, what does that mean? That means that some of you, anybody watching this, you're not meant to be a manager, and you may not meant to be a leader. Maybe your management and leadership of yourself is what is required of you. That's what a lot of the tribes did. If you look back to the Bible example, there's 2 million people. You've got, maybe about 2,000 leaders at most. You've got some managers that were set up by the leaders, and then you've got 1.2 million people who are responsible for managing and leading themselves. There's no requirement for you to feel bad about yourself if you're not in a position of management or leadership. And I can look at some of the people on this call, and I think about how wonderful a job you do at doing what we call in the economic world being a sole trader. There are different kinds of business models. One of them is called the sole trader. There's a sole trader. That's somebody who's an entrepreneur, starts a business, leads it by themselves, manages it by themselves, runs it by themselves, and is highly successful, makes lots of money, does a great job. Then you have a partnership. That's where you bring in 1 or 2 other people. Then you have a joint venture, which is where you team with another whole group of people. And then you have corporations and companies. I feel like the sole trader is kind of looked down on. Whereas I think it's something that needs to be elevated, because many of you are fantastic at leading and managing yourselves and getting a tremendous amount of work done and doing it well, on time, under budget, and serving the teams that you are in. And please don't ever despise doing that. And if you're a manager and a leader as a sole trader, there is nothing wrong with that. That is something that should be congratulated. It shouldn't be looked down on. The 5th thing that a manager has to be good at is delegation. So even as a delegator, as a manager, you are a delegator. Now, the difference between the delegation that a manager does and a leader does is this. A manager has to be able to get things done on their own. They have their own job responsibilities, but they have to also effectively, and that is the key word, effectively assign work to other people. Then they have to trust them to get it done correctly. How do you do that as a manager? How do you effectively assign work to people and trust them to get it done? Because nobody ever likes to be micromanaged. I've never met a human that's ever said to me, please micromanage me. I know some people prefer more touch points in their management, but I've never met anybody who said, micromanage me, please. Effective managers have to be successful and supportive delegators. So how do you do that? I'll give you the simplest thing, and I've mentioned it already once here. You have to, 1, provide a very clear target for the people on your team, whoever you are managing, very clear bullseye with very clear boundaries. Here's what you are not allowed to do, and therefore everything in the middle you can do. And however you want to hit the target, if it's a different way, if you want to know how I'd hit it, ask me and I'll tell you. Otherwise, you come up with your way. Then you check in with those people as you are those people you're delegating. Now you are acutely aware, so you're checking in. Rudy Giuliani wrote a great book on leadership of how he managed the city of New York in the early 90s out of a crisis. One of the things that he did was he set up an ability to have a morning meeting with all the leaders of the city. And what he would do every morning, 15-minute meeting, and they would just go around the whole table and they would each of them say what they had done yesterday, what are they doing today, or what their teams had done and what are they doing today. Very, very simple. But what it showed him is that all his people were coming to, they were driving to work every morning, acutely aware of what happened yesterday and what needs to happen today, because they knew they were going to have to say it in the morning meeting. So there was an accountability there of like, oh, I got to make sure I'm going to have to say it in front of everybody. And that's all he used. He just used it as a tool for making sure that leaders were acutely aware of what was going on. And he wanted to delegate, and that's what we should want to do also. Okay, moving on. What makes a good leader? First thing, vision. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I really feel like most of you have heard lots about leadership, and so I'm going to read through this and just kind of go through it quickly, because I think that this is something that I don't know how new this will be to some of you, but I'm sure the clarification of some of it will be very new. Managers oversee the day-to-day operations of their teams, but leaders are focused on strategy. They're focused on shaping the overall direction of the culture, all the departments, the entire organization. And leaders have to have foresight, and they have to have the capacity to think big in order to steer a large ship. The manager is directing the crew. Think about it that way. If you look, the great leadership book, It's Your Ship, a great book. If you ever get a chance to read that, I would highly recommend it. There's only one captain. And this is the thing with leadership, is that the further down you get in the organization, the less leadership there is and the more management there is. Now, are you leading your teams? Yes, you are. But really effectively to lead them, you need to manage them. But there's only one person setting the direction. We have a very clear goal setter in our organization that we work for, Pastor Rob Kedling. And then whatever organization other people may work for, you hopefully got a clear leader. Maybe that hasn't been the case in your previous experience. But it's important that leaders have the capacity for vision. Number two, they have to have curiosity. You must be curious. You can't ever think of yourself as a leader as you know everything. You must be curious about learning things you don't know. The leaders are never content to just think that they know everything and be okay with that and just bringing everybody up to their level. Leaders are trying to bring people up to their level and trying to increase themselves. They're always looking to challenge their own norms, their own perspectives. They're naturally innovating new ways to do things. And so they have an innate curiosity to them. Some people don't have that. It's not natural to be curious. That's okay. That's okay. Maybe that means that you're going to be an amazing manager, and leadership is not something that is something you need to look into. You can be incredibly effective as part of the team as a high level manager. I was a senior manager in an accounting firm. I never got to lead the accounting firm. Never. I was there for 14 years. I never got to set culture. I never got to set any direction of where the accounting firm was going. I was there for 14 years, rose to a very senior position in the accounting firm, and I was always the recipient of leadership, but then I would lead the people according to the direction of which the captain had said the ship is going. To do that, I had to learn how to become curious about bettering myself and bettering the way that I led people. Third thing is communication. Leaders must have incredible communication skills that are different than managers. Managers need to be able to communicate directions, and then they have to be able to communicate feedback. Leaders focus less on technical details in their communication. They focus more on two things that are highly important: encouragement and empowerment. If you are ever responsible for leading people, it is your primary responsibility through your communication to allow those people to feel encouraged and empowered. Now, that is difficult in some situations, particularly if you have a personality conflict, if you've got somebody who wants to head in a different direction. You can give them all the encouragement you want, but they don't hear. what you say. They just hear that you want to go in a different direction than them. But it is a responsibility of a leader to communicate encouragement and power. Hey, you did a great job. Your team did a great job, man. I'm so proud of the way that you guys came up with that. That was amazing. Hey, what do you think? How do you think we should do this? I know I've been in meetings where there are times where I could have said something different in a meeting to somebody who was a direct report to me, and I was in a meeting with them and somebody I reported to, and I try to defer my best to the person that reported to me to say, okay, you share everything you think. Even if I had different thoughts, I wanted them to feel empowered to be in that meeting and say, oh, my leader trusts me to report to his leader. And he's just facilitating this for me. That's a way to communicate empowerment of people that you lead. Now, here's another thing that leaders need to do, and this is not fair. This is why leadership is not for everybody. Okay, leaders have to be able to know how to coach people. If you don't know how to coach people, you're not going to make a good leader. Now, coaching is two things. Coaching is encouraging somebody when they fall down. And if you've been in any sports whatsoever, you know that a coach also sometimes gets in your face. A coach stands in your face and says, hey, you can do better. Now, some people don't like to do that. They don't want to get in people's faces. They only want to be an encourager. But a leader has to be able to communicate how to equip, how to encourage, how to inspire, and how to challenge. And a leader has to understand, when do I step back and let other voices be louder? And then now, when do I need to take action? All through the method of communication. Okay, number 4. Leaders have to have the skill of the emotional intelligence. In order for leaders to inspire other people to follow them, instead of instructing them to follow them, if you're just telling people to follow you, your leadership will cap out pretty quickly. You need to inspire them. I look at people, I'm not going to quote names, but I look at people on this Zoom that I'm on, and I see people who are just naturals at inspiring people to rise up and be the best they can be. But to do that, you have to have a high degree of emotional intelligence, which means that you have to have an ability to empathize with others. Now, this is not everybody. Not everybody has the ability to empathize. In other words, put yourself in their shoes. Leaders have to be able to do that. You have to be able to establish trust. You have to be able to establish genuine connections, and then motivate people according to the connection that you have made with them. And that will be different, which means you need to be able to coach all different kinds of personalities: introverts, extroverts, feelers, thinkers, people who are justice driven, people who are perception driven. You have to be able to lead all of them and get them to work together. Now, what's the 5th thing that a leader has to have? They have to have a high degree of accountability. Most successful leaders understand that they are accountable up and down. They view themselves as responsible not only for themselves, but also for the people who look up to them and report to them. So they don't ever pass the buck. They don't pass blame. If something happens in their team, they own it. They don't throw their team under the bus. They never do that. They always understand that they are accountable for the team that they lead. You have to have that. I'll read you to 2 quotes. A leader believes that they are accountable to those they lead. Servant leadership. A manager believes that their team members are accountable to them. What does that mean? That means managers understand that there is an accountability from the people they manage to them. Leaders understand that there is an accountability from the people below them for them to serve them in how they lead. Very different skill set. It's not one versus the other as far as one's good, one's bad. It's when you're in different positions, You understand accountability differently. Now, the problem is a lot of people are very good at one or the other, but usually, if I'm being really honest with you, most people who understand management accountability can very easily transition to leadership accountability, but it's not the other way around. That's why there are a lot of people who are great, wonderful managers, but when they are given the mantle of true leadership, they crumble because they're not set up in a way to understand accountability and to be able to serve like that. I think about Jesus as an ultimate example in pretty much everything I do. No matter when I was the CEO of an organization running a property development company, if I was leading an advertising agency, if I was a senior manager in the accounting firm, I always would think about Jesus as an example of him with the disciples and how he would lead them but manage them. He had to like you think about Thomas. Thomas says, "I'm not going to believe unless I see." And well, leader Jesus could have said, "Well, bad luck for you, Thomas. Sorry, dude. I guess if you're putting those constraints on me, it's not going to happen." But he didn't. He managed Thomas because he knew how to get the best out of Thomas. He said, "Listen, here you go. You get to see. And blessed are you because you now believe because you've seen. But more blessed will be people who believe without seeing." So Jesus understood how to manage Thomas. He also understood how to manage Peter. Think about trying to manage Peter. Peter's like the most crazy disciple. One minute he's walking on the water, trusting Jesus in absolutely everything. The next thing he's totally denying Jesus. Then he's like cutting off a guy's ear in the Garden of Gethsemane, which Jesus doesn't want him to do. Jesus is constantly saying to Peter, "Great job. Dude, what are you doing? You're killing me. Great job." Peter, again? Really? And yet he always said to him, "Peter, I believe in you. And the revelation that you have of who I am, I'm going to build my church on that revelation." And so I look at those examples of how Jesus managed and led his disciples. And I think it doesn't matter, whether you work in a Christian organization or not. There's an opportunity for you to use the principles that Jesus had. Leaders don't view people who report to them as burdens. They don't look at them as like, "Oh man, I got to read that report. I've got to help you solve another problem." They also don't look at people who report to them as people who could potentially hurt their reputation. They don't do that. No, they view people who report to them as people they must serve and they must support. You won't ever earn that position if all you're ever doing is telling them what to do because you want to be the expert. Yes, you should be increasing your education always to become more better in your subject matter, increasing your understanding. But if you have the insecurity to feel like, "Well, I'm the subject matter expert in the team that I manage," then it's my responsibility. I feel like I'm a weak leader and I'm a weak manager if I don't offer suggestions and if I don't give and don't tell. No, if you build trust with your team, your team, I've found this, will naturally just ask you for their input. I was in a situation yesterday where somebody who's, I don't know, reports to somebody who reports to somebody who reports to me. And I happen to be walking past their desk and they asked me a question. "Hey, Pastor Anthony, what do you think about this?" And I didn't look at that and say, "Hey, listen, go talk to somebody else." I was like, "Oh, I felt it was my opportunity to serve them and to support them." And what they were going to do, actually, I found out in the course of the conversation, had they done it the way they were going to do it, actually would have directly negatively impacted me. But I was able to support them and say, "Okay, how about if you did this, this, and this, and what about attacking it this way?" They asked me for it. Now, had they not asked me for that and they had just gone ahead and done what they did, it probably wouldn't have played out super well for me personally. And I would have had to deal with that situation and I would have had to have supported that person and I would have had to have encouraged them and then gone through and set up a system so it maybe wouldn't happen again. But this is what we have to do. And the difference between management and leadership is understanding accountability. Ultimately, that person that I spoke to, I'm accountable for them. So I have to serve them. I have to support them. So they are the differences between the skills required for a manager and a leader. And there's a lot more time that I could spend on each of these, but I do want to allow some time for question and answers. Let me say this, being a good manager will create space for you to become the best leader you can be. Being a good manager will create space for you to become the best leader that you can be. So, having said that, I'm going to allow Melissa to help me here navigate any questions. And if you have any questions, please just put them in the chat box, and we can go through those. And if they're not a lot, then that's fine. But Melissa, do we have any questions?
Yes. Can you repeat the difference between leader and manager accountability?
Okay, and who was that from, Melissa?
I believe it was from Pastor Aaron.
Okay, the difference between leader and manager accountability. Okay, I don't want to spend too much time repeating things because I'm going to send you the notes, if I'm being honest with you, Pastor Aaron. So if that's okay with you, when we send these notes out, you'll have that. But the differences really, they're acute. The differences in accountability between leader and manager. Managers, I feel, take on too much accountability for things that they're actually not accountable for. I guess is probably something I could add. Whereas leaders sometimes don't take on accountability for things that they are accountable for. That would probably be something that I could add to what I said. But we'll send out this link and you can watch it over again and you'll get the notes. What's the next question, Melissa? If we have any?
Ben Olson, should the role of manager and leader always be separated, or can one person act as both? And is that setting that person, or is that setting that person organization up for failure?
Wow, what a great question, Ben, and a question that is very applicable to most organizations because they don't have the staffing to be able to have separate managers and leaders. So here's how you do it, Ben. If you have the responsibility of managing people and leading them, the two, then this is the priority of your organization. Manage them first and then lead them second. Don't lead them first and manage them second. Okay? And why do I say that? Because if you are in that position, you are already having a vision and a direction flowing down to you. And if you manage people, you will then be able to lead them. However, if you lead people, you won't always be able to manage them. It's not converse. And so I think if you have a role where management and leadership is required, I think also there's sometimes, Ben, there is a difference in the understanding of leadership. I think if somebody has the title, and particularly in church world, we want everybody to be a leader. We're like, everybody's a leader. You lead, everybody leads. And what ends up happening is we have nobody managing, which means things don't get done well. We don't have consistency. And this is the same in a lot of organizations. There's no ownership, there's no accountability. And because all we want to do is lead people, and we feel that to be lead people. For example, I'll give you an example within our organization. Connections passes are great opportunities for us to be able to share that. And we have a connections pastor at the campus I lead, and Pastor Joey Ketchum, and his responsibility is to lead and manage. He has both responsibilities. Now, if he is in church on a Sunday morning and he's sitting in the front row, I have to assume that he has managed and is acutely aware of every area that he's responsible for and that there are no holes in it whatsoever. If he's not acutely aware, he shouldn't be on the front row. Now, he's on the front row leading, but I need him to manage first and then lead second. So that is an example that plays out very practically. Now, once he establishes a different process of himself where he understands acute awareness and that every box has been checked and everything's in fine working order, then there is an opportunity for him to lead at that time. Next question.
How do you become a better manager or leader?
Do everything I've told you in this talk. And I don't mean that to be trite. I say that's why I'm doing this. The skills. You have to increase in the skills of the 5 areas of each one. How can you do these things? You'll become better at both.
From Jillian, how would being a mentor and seeking mentorship play into each category? And should we be intentional to seek out in both categories, or to identify the category we likely fall into and focus on wisdom within that category?
Yeah, that's a great question, Gillian. I think mentorship is about personal development. And I think personal development helps you understand who you are. The more you understand who you are, the better manager and leader you'll become. I wouldn't seek management mentorship and leadership mentorship. I would seek personal mentorship. And then as I'm being mentored personally by people in who I am as a person, then I can become a better manager or a better leader, whichever one you are. But I think mentoring and seeking mentors is highly valuable. I don't think enough people do it. And I know I have mentors still in my life and I am so appreciative for them because they help me. But what they do is they don't really help me become a better manager or leader. They help me become a better Anthony Richards. And as I do that, and I'm still getting better, and I've still got edges that need to be softened, and I still have other areas that need to be sharpened, and I've got all that. But I would say make mentorship personal. Next one.
Can you speak to the idea of leading up well, and how do we do that in light of this discussion? That was from Pastor Lindsay.
Yeah, great question, Pastor Lindsay. I think that leading up is always, there's a tread carefully when it comes to that, to leading up. But I do believe John Maxwell's 360-degree leadership book is probably the best step-by-step guide that you can follow of how to lead up in an organization well. And the way that you lead up is if people are leading well, and people are managing well, leading up happens automatically. When it doesn't happen is when there isn't the opportunity for accountability, when there isn't the opportunity to offer direction, and direction is given only. One of the things that I think that you can do as somebody, if let's just say a lot of you are managed by somebody, so you're just on a team, and when it comes to leading up, there's things that you can suggest to the person that's managing you and say, hey, listen, would it be okay if when you give me a task that you kind of maybe give me an opportunity to see if I can develop a strategy of how to do what you're asking, as opposed to every time you give me something to do, you tell me how to do it. Would that be okay? Could we just try that and have an experiment, see if that works a couple of times? You can do that. Now, if that person says no, then you've got an opportunity to say, okay, well, that's not the way that we're being led in our organization, and I really feel that like you're micromanaging me. Now, that gets into the area of confrontation, which again, in different cultures is really shied away from. But if you don't have the ability to have tough conversations, you can't lead up. You'll never lead up. And I think it's highly important. Again, if I use an example, I look at how I'm doing personally at people being able to lead up to me based on the things that people communicate to me. And a couple of weeks ago, again, using Pastor Joey as an example, who reports to Pastor Sean and myself, and then reports up the chain. He came into my office and he said, hey, Pastor Anthony, this certain thing happened with you in the lobby in church on a Sunday. And maybe next time, could you do it this way with me? That would just help me process it a little differently if you took a different approach. And I said, Joey, I'm so sorry that I did it that way and it didn't work for you. And thank you for coming and letting me know. And I will do it differently from now on. That was him leading up to me. And that's somebody who reports to somebody who reports to me. And I felt comfortable that he felt comfortable to be able to walk into my office and say that. Right now, we have a very clear structure of management and leadership in the departments and campuses that I oversee. So I feel like I'm doing an okay job. I can still get better. But that shows me that we do have a culture where it is able to be done. But Pastor Joey, kudos to him for having the courage to do it. Okay, next question.
Next question. This is the first management teaching I've heard in a church context. Why do you think management has become such a buzzkill subject in the church world? From Dave Olson.
Yeah, that's a great question. Before I go on, I'm going to go to 11:05. I'm going to go 5 minutes over because we started 5 minutes late. So just want to, we'll go for another few minutes. I think it is something that it's not as attractive a word. It's not as attractive a concept. And it's not as attractive to basic Christian principles in church, because we're taught about leading. We're taught about, we constantly hear the word leader. We don't ever hear the word management, yet the Bible is full of management examples, absolutely full of them. Think about the disciples managing the feeding of the 5,000. Jesus led them, said, here's the vision, feed them. He gave them the resources. They had to manage how to get the food out. We don't ever think about that. They had to manage it. They had to get teams. They had to, there was the management to pull that off was just as important as the leadership to make it happen. And I think that the reason it's become a buzzkill is because it's not, I don't want to use this overused word, but it's not sexy enough. It's kind of like, oh, I don't want to be a manager. I feel like I'm not good enough unless I'm a leader. I want to be a leader. Let me be a leader. And we end up just really setting people up to lose instead of win. So that's my opinion, Pastor Dave. Next question.
Same from Pastor Dave. How do you use one-on-ones as a tool for management and or leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question. Another great question. These are great questions. For me personally, when I have one-on-ones, I try to lead with how are you doing and what can I do better for you if I'm doing that. And always try to start off with listening rather than speaking. I think leaders are way better listeners than they are speakers. I think if you haven't developed the concept of listening, it's very hard to be a leader if you just want to talk. And so I try to do that. And now, to be honest with you, that's against my natural personality. So I had to develop a tool, I don't know, probably 25 years ago when I first got into executive leadership. And I'll be honest with you. So I'm just going to be raw honest. I would have to sit in meetings with people who reported to me, and in my head, this is what I'm telling myself: shut up, Anthony, shut up, shut up, shut up, don't talk, don't talk, don't talk, shut up, write notes, shut up, don't talk. I had to do that to myself because my natural reaction was, as a problem solver, was one sentence came out of their mouth and I wanted to solve the problem. But I had to listen, and again, one-on-ones. You'll get a great understanding of how you're leading people based on like things they'll write to you about you in their annual report. If they'll write difficult things and say difficult things, then okay, you've created a safer place for them to be able to share things with you that are not always pleasant. And that is a much better, one-on-ones are a great place for that. I always try. I don't ever use one-on-ones. I don't ever use annual reviews as a replacement for one-on-ones. I don't want to ever get to an annual review and tell somebody they hadn't heard from me before. I want to lead them and manage them constantly as an ongoing flow. That's the next one.
From City Campus, what gets celebrated gets repeated. At River Valley, leaders get celebrated more than managers. Should this always be the case at River Valley with an organization that's built on emotional intelligence and last-minute changes? Or should this change? And if so, how do we change it?
Yes, that's a great, that's an observation and a statement as much as it is a question, let's be honest. So let me refine the statement a little bit if I may be so bold. What gets celebrated gets repeated by insecure people. That's how I would write that. When insecurities rise up within you, you repeat what you think gets celebrated. Now, I don't mean that to be mean and say you're an insecure person, you're horrible if you only repeat what gets celebrated. If you can learn to have a security in doing what has been asked of you and achieving fruit in that, then over the long term, you will understand that it's not about being celebrated, it's about getting your job done. Now, I am a prime example of that. I have been in this organization, this current one, for nearly 15 years. I'm in my 15th year. August this year will be my 15-year anniversary. And there are a lot of things that I have done that have not been celebrated at the time that I did them. But I repeated them over and over and over, and the fruit of what I have been able to achieve in certain areas is what is then ends up being celebrated, is the long-term fruit. But if you only repeat everything that gets celebrated, then you are really going to you're going to fall into a trap that will hurt you, not the organization. So please don't do that. The other thing I would say is find somebody who is safe for you in the organization that might be at a different level that you can speak to about it. If there's a problem with that, then if there's conflict, we have Matthew 18 as a guide of how to solve problems like that. And we also have an opportunity to better what we are doing as an organization. So Ben, your observation, I think, I understand your observation. And part of me as a senior leader within this organization doing this talk today is because we understand that we haven't done as an organization a good job at equipping people for management. So we're trying to change that, and that's what this is all about. So hopefully this will help equip you, but it will also help change us, maybe celebrate different things. Maybe, Ben, there's some opportunity for us to get better at celebrating different things and celebrating fruit that is maybe in the past hasn't been celebrated. And the better manager everybody becomes, and the better accountability there is from leadership down to management, then I think there'll be an opportunity for those things to get celebrated that need to be, and they haven't so far. So we can get better as an organization, and we as individuals can get better at the part we play within the organization. Let's just do one more question if there is any, otherwise we can be done. Melissa's shaking her head.
Questions. Pastor Mark and Pam just said listening is good for marriage advice as well.
Awesome. Yes, there you go. Well, thank you for your time today. I know at times might feel like I'm kind of moving through this like a bit of a bulldozer to get to the end, but I really wanted to cover off all the topics in a timely manner, and also wanted to have the opportunity to answer some of your questions. I love talking about this. Please talk about this with whomever is your manager and whomever is your leader, and let's create the best environment we can within the organization we work in to better our skills at management, better our skills at leadership, so that overall we can help achieve the bullseye and the objective of our organization. That's what it's all about. So we all have a singular, unified vision that we are going after, and that helps us understand how to manage and how to lead. So thank you for your time today. Be blessed. Have an awesome week.